The alien commander's head exploded before he finished his demand for surrender. Danny Cruz didn't wait for orders. He never did. The particle beam from the Velcron warship hadn't even finished charging when Danny's rifle sent 3 rounds through the observation port. The command deck beyond turned into chaos. Nobody on Earth expected the war. The Velcron Collective arrived on a Tuesday morning, their fleet blocking out the sun over major cities. They broadcast their terms in 40 languages simultaneously. Humanity had 72 hours to submit or face extinction. Every government scrambled. Every military mobilized, but Earth's generals knew the truth within 6 hours. They couldn't win. The Velcron had conquered 47 species across the galaxy. Their technology was centuries ahead. Their warriors were bred for combat, standing 9 feet tall with exoskeletons that could withstand nuclear blasts. They moved through space like gods, and they expected humanity to kneel like every other species before them. Earth's solution was desperate and brilliant. The generals didn't deploy their best soldiers. They emptied the prisons. Danny Cruz had killed 6 people before his 18th birthday. Marcus Webb had burned down a rival gang's headquarters with everyone inside. Lisa Monroe had specialized in making people disappear. Jake Palmer's body count was so high, even the prosecutors lost track. These weren't soldiers. They were predators wearing uniforms. The first battle happened over Denver. Velcron dropships descended expecting organized resistance. What they got was Danny Cruz and his unit breaching their hull before they landed. The aliens wore armor that could stop conventional weapons. Danny used a welding torch on their faceplates. Up close, intimate, watching them suffocate. He smiled the whole time. Command tried to establish protocols. Marcus Webb ignored every single one. When his unit encountered a Velcron patrol, regulations said to call for artillery support. Marcus walked straight into their formation with a plasma cutter and turned their squad into pieces. The aliens had never seen anything like it. They had rules of engagement. Marcus had a taste for blood and official permission to indulge it. The Velcron expected tactics. They got chaos. Lisa Monroe infiltrated their forward base by walking through the front entrance covered in purple Velcron blood. The guards hesitated for 3 seconds trying to understand what they were seeing. She killed 18 of them before anyone raised an alarm. Her unit followed her in and didn't leave anyone breathing. Earth's military command watched their reforms through satellite feeds. Generals vomited. Politicians demanded investigations. But the Velcron kept dying and humanity kept surviving. The prison soldiers didn't follow rules because they'd never followed rules. They didn't fear death because most of them had stopped caring years ago. They fought like cornered animals because that's exactly what they were. Jake Palmer's unit hit a Velcron supply convoy outside Phoenix. Standard procedure was reconnaissance and targeted strikes. Jake strapped himself with explosives and charged their lead transport. He survived the blast and came out shooting. His squad followed him through the gap, and they butchered the survivors with combat knives. The Velcron warriors, bred for 1,000 years to be the perfect soldiers, broke and ran from humans who fought like demons. The war changed in those first 72 hours. The Velcron expected resistance. They expected casualties. They didn't expect humans who killed with their bare hands when ammunition ran out. They didn't expect soldiers who laughed while bleeding. They especially didn't expect enemies who got more dangerous when cornered. Danny Cruz stood over a dying Velcron officer on the 3rd day. The alien's translator still worked. It asked him why. Why humans fought like monsters. Why they showed no mercy. Why they seemed to enjoy the violence. Danny reloaded his rifle and looked at the burning city behind them. He thought about the cell he'd lived in for 8 years. He thought about the life sentence he'd been serving. He thought about the general who'd offered him freedom in exchange for fighting. He told the alien the truth. Earth didn't send its best. Earth sent its worst. The galaxy was about to learn why humanity locked these people away. The Velcrin invasion force expected to conquer another primitive species. They expected 3 days of light resistance before humanity surrendered. They ruled half the galaxy. They had never lost a war. But they'd never fought anyone who sent murderers instead of soldiers. They'd never faced an enemy that weaponized its own criminals. And they were about to discover that the scariest thing in the universe wasn't superior technology or bred warriors. It was a human being with nothing left to lose and official permission to kill. The second wave hit Los Angeles before dawn. Velcrin assault carriers descended through the atmosphere like falling stars. Their shields shimmered with energy that could deflect missiles. Their weapons could level city blocks. Command sent Lisa Monroe's unit to defend the harbor. She took 43 people. Most of them had life sentences. 8 were on death row before the invasion. None of them expected to survive the week. Lisa told them the truth in the transport. They weren't there to hold ground or buy time for evacuation. They were there to make the Velcrin bleed. The first carrier landed on the docks. Its loading ramp descended, and 300 Velcrin warriors marched out in perfect formation. They wore ceremonial armor because they expected easy victory. Lisa waited until they reached the warehouse district. Then she detonated every building simultaneously. The explosions turned 6 blocks into an inferno. Velcrin shields protected them from the blast, but not the collapsing structures. Steel beams and concrete buried half the formation. Lisa's unit hit them from underground tunnels they'd spent the night repairing. No rifles at first, just blades and raw fury. Marcus Webb found the Velcrin command post 3 miles inland. Intelligence said it was heavily fortified with 200 guards and automated defense systems. Marcus walked through the front door during shift change. He wore a Velcrin uniform stripped from a corpse. It didn't fit. The guards saw him immediately. He killed the first one with a broken bottle before they could sound the alarm. The second died from a wrench to the skull. Marcus grabbed a plasma rifle from the third and carved through the command center. He wasn't trained in Velcrin weapons. He figured it out by trial and error, and the errors were spectacular. One miss melted through 3 walls and ignited their ammunition storage. The base exploded from the inside. Marcus walked out through the flames with his unit behind him. They'd lost 12 people in the assault. None of them were Marcus. He had burns covering 40% of his body and 3 broken ribs. He refused medical attention and demanded to know where the next target was. Jake Palmer's assignment was different. Velcrin Fleet Command had established orbit over the city. They were coordinating planetary bombardment from above, targeting human military installations. Earth's Space Force was destroyed in the first wave. Getting to the Velcrin ships was impossible. Jake volunteered anyway. Command gave him a captured Velcrin shuttle and 20 volunteers for maximum security facilities. The shuttle's registration was still active. Velcrin security let them dock without question. They expected reinforcements from the surface. What they got was Jake Palmer and 20 killers who'd spent their lives hurting people. The station had 3,000 Velcrin personnel. Jake's team moved through it like cancer. They disabled life support on Deck 7. They sabotaged the gravity generators on Deck 12. They planted explosives in the reactor chamber and set them on a timer. The Velcrin finally understood what was happening 40 minutes after Jake docked. They sent security forces to stop the intruders. Jake met them in a corridor junction with a stolen plasma cannon. He held the trigger down until the weapon melted in his hands. The corridor was so full of bodies that reinforcements couldn't pass. His team split up across the station. Most of them died in the fighting. Jake didn't care. He wasn't there to survive. He was there to hurt them. When Velcrin warriors cornered him near the reactor, he smiled and showed them the detonator in his hand. He triggered it early. The explosion tore through 6 decks. The station's orbit destabilized. It began falling toward Earth's atmosphere. Every Velcrin on board scrambled for escape pods. Jake sealed the pod bay doors from the outside and welded them shut. Then he found an escape pod for himself and waited until the last possible second. He watched the station burn up on re-entry from his pod's window. 3,000 Velcrin died screaming. Jake landed in the Pacific Ocean 12 hours later. Coast Guard picked him up, still laughing. Danny Cruz led the defense of Chicago against their heaviest assault. Yet 10 Velcrin carriers supported by orbital bombardment. Military analysts gave the city 3 hours before it fell. Danny's unit had different ideas. They didn't defend the city, they abandoned it. Evacuation had finished 2 days earlier. Chicago was empty except for Danny and 200 convicted killers. They turned every building into a trap, every street into a killing ground, every intersection into an ambush point. The Velcrin landed expecting resistance. They got silence. Their scouts moved into the city cautiously. Nothing happened for the first hour. Then Danny triggered the first trap. A parking garage collapsed onto a Velcrin platoon. The survivors tried to help their wounded. Snipers killed them one by one. The Velcrin adapted. They sent in heavy armor and moved in tight formations. Danny adapted faster. His people used the sewers to move under Velcrin positions. They'd surface behind enemy lines, kill everyone within reach, and disappear before reinforcements arrived. The Velcrin tried to track them. The sewer system was too complex. They tried to flood it. Danny had people waiting with sealed doors and alternative routes. By the third day, the Velcrin were killing each other. Danny's unit started wearing captured armor and speaking through translation devices. Velcrin squads would receive orders to move to certain positions. They'd follow those orders and walk into ambushes. Command tried to verify authentication codes. Danny had captured a signals officer on day 2. The officer gave up every code before dying. The battle lasted 9 days. The Velcrin committed 6,000 warriors to taking Chicago. Fewer than 200 made it out. Danny lost 90 people from his unit. He considered it acceptable losses. Command considered it a miracle. But something was changing across all the battlefields. The Velcrin weren't just losing. They were breaking. Their warriors were trained from birth to face death with honor. They'd fought wars across the galaxy for centuries, but they'd never fought anyone like humanity's prison soldiers. Lisa Monroe's unit captured a Velcrin commander outside San Diego. She spent 3 hours asking him questions. Most of the answers were useless. Strategic data that Command already knew, fleet positions that satellites had tracked. But one thing he said stuck with her. The Velcrin had a word in their language. Roughly translated, it meant absolute evil, something so fundamentally wrong that it violated the natural order. They used this word to describe demons from their ancient mythology, creatures that killed without purpose, beings that enjoyed causing suffering. The Velcrin had started using that word for humans. Not all humans, specifically for soldiers like Lisa and Danny and Marcus and Jake. The prison units, the ones who fought without rules or mercy or hesitation. The Velcrin warriors were trained killers, the humans were something worse. Lisa killed the commander when she was done questioning him. She used her knife because bullets were getting scarce. She thought about what he'd said while she cleaned the blade. The Velcrin had conquered half the galaxy. They'd fought species that were stronger, faster, smarter. But they'd never fought anyone who scared them. Earth had cracked open its prisons and unleashed something the galaxy had never seen. Not soldiers. Not warriors. Humans who'd spent their lives learning to hurt people, now given unlimited targets and official authorization. The Velcrin were learning that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't its technology or its numbers. It was the monsters humanity kept locked away from itself. And now those monsters were loose. Marcus Webb's unit hit a Velcrin staging area in Nevada. Intelligence said it was being prepared for their final offensive. The Velcrin were regrouping after 2 weeks of losses. They were bringing in reinforcements from other campaigns, fresh troops who hadn't faced humans yet. Warriors who still thought this would be an easy conquest. Marcus had other plans. The staging area covered 20 square miles of desert. It held 40,000 Velcrin and enough equipment to level a continent. Standard military thinking said you'd need airstrikes and artillery to make a dent. Command allocated Marcus 300 people and whatever weapons they could carry. He didn't attack the base. He attacked their water supply. The Velcrin needed a specific chemical composition to survive. They'd set up purification systems fed by underground wells. Marcus poisoned every well within 50 miles. The Velcrin didn't notice for 2 days. By then, half their troops were sick. The Velcrin sent foraging parties to find clean water. Marcus killed them all. He didn't ambush them cleanly. He left survivors who'd watched their friends die. Let them report back. Let them describe what humans did to Velcrin prisoners. Let fear spread through the base like disease. On the 4th day, the Velcrin tried to evacuate. Their ships came down to extract the sick and wounded. Marcus had captured anti-air weapons from a previous battle. His people shot down 6 transports. The crashes killed hundreds more. The Velcrin stopped trying to evacuate. On the 7th day, they tried to fight their way out. A convoy of heavy armor pushed toward the nearest Velcrin-controlled territory. Marcus let them get 10 miles from the base. Then he triggered the explosives his people had buried along every possible route 3 days earlier. The convoy turned into scrap metal and burning bodies. The Velcrin were trapped. 40,000 warriors with advanced technology, surrounded by 300 humans with improvised weapons and tactical ruthlessness. Command told Marcus to maintain the siege. Marcus decided to end it. His unit hit the base from 12 different directions simultaneously. No coordination, no unified assault, just small groups of humans appearing from nowhere, killing everything they could reach, and vanishing before Velcrin forces could respond. The aliens tried to form defensive perimeters. The humans ignored them and attacked supply depots instead. Food stores burned. Medical facilities exploded. Communications equipment was sabotaged. The Velcrin had 40,000 troops but couldn't organize them. Every time they concentrated forces in one area, humans would hit somewhere else. Every time they spread out to cover more ground, humans would mass and overwhelm isolated positions. Marcus himself led an assault on the command center. Velcrin generals watched from orbital ships as 3 humans in stolen armor walked through their front gate. The guards were checking identification when Marcus opened fire. He killed 6 before they reacted. His team killed 20 more in the resulting chaos. The command center went dark. Velcrin forces across the base lost coordination. Unit commanders started making independent decisions. Some tried to hold their positions. Some tried to break through the human siege lines. Some simply surrendered, though Marcus didn't take prisoners unless he needed information. The battle lasted 30 hours. When it ended, the staging area was a graveyard. 40,000 Velcrin reduced to scattered survivors fleeing into the desert. Marcus lost 80 people. He'd started with 300. The math said he'd won. His face said he wished there'd been more fighting. Jake Palmer was hunting Velcrin officers. Command had noticed something during the campaign. When humans killed Velcrin leadership, the remaining troops became disorganized, leaderless, easy targets. Earth started assigning specialized units to target high-value individuals. Jake volunteered for the most dangerous one. Velcrin Fleet Command had retreated to a carrier in high orbit, protected by shields and point defense systems and 300 fighter craft. Getting close was suicide. Jake took 12 people and a stolen Velcrin courier ship. Command gave them forged credentials and 3 days of instruction on Velcrin military protocol. None of them remembered the protocols. Jake flew the ship drunk and barely avoided hitting two Velcrin destroyers on approach. The fleet let them dock anyway because the credentials checked out and nobody expected humans to be stupid enough to try this. The carrier held 15,000 Velcrin. Jake's team of 13 moved through it like sharks through a school of fish. They didn't try to hide. They wore human uniforms, carried human weapons. When Velcrin personnel saw them, Jake smiled and waved before opening fire. The carrier went into lockdown within 10 minutes. Automated systems sealed blast doors and cut off sections of the ship. Jake's team was supposed to be trapped. They used plasma cutters to go through the walls instead of the doors. Velcrin security would set up ambushes at choke points. Jake would come through the ceiling or the floor. They found Fleet Command in the secure level. 20 Velcrin admirals coordinating the entire invasion from holographic displays, protected by 100 elite guards in the best armor the Velcrin possessed. Jake walked in through the ventilation system and dropped a grenade into the middle of the room. The explosion killed half the admirals instantly. Jake's team poured through the vent behind him. The Velcrin guards were elite warriors with centuries of training. Jake's people were murderers who'd learned to fight in prison yards and back alleys. It wasn't a fair fight. The guards tried to form defensive positions. Jake's team attacked from positions that made no tactical sense. Through walls, through the floor. One person literally came through a waste disposal chute and started shooting. The Velcrin couldn't predict them because the humans weren't following any recognized combat doctrine. They were fighting like lunatics because that's what they were. Convicted killers given military weapons and pointed at an enemy. Jake personally killed 3 admirals with a combat knife. One of his team members strangled a guard with their own intestines. Another used a dead Velcrin as a club to beat 2 more guards to death. The secure level turned into an abattoir. Velcrin reinforcements arrived to find their leadership dead and humans covered in purple blood, laughing at them. Jake triggered explosives his team had planted throughout the carrier. Not enough to destroy it, just enough to cripple life support and propulsion. The carrier began drifting out of orbit. Velcrin crew scrambled for escape pods. Jake's team had sabotaged half of them 2 hours earlier. The carrier had 15,000 personnel. Only 6,000 made it off before the ship burned up on re-entry. Jake and his people stole a shuttle and departed while the Velcrin were still evacuating. Command tried to court-martial Jake for violating operational parameters. His mission was reconnaissance only. He destroyed a fleet carrier and killed the invasion's leadership instead. The military brass wanted discipline. The politicians wanted results. Jake got promoted and sent to his next target. Danny Cruz was defending Houston when the Velcrin tried something new. Chemical weapons. They'd avoided them earlier because their own troops couldn't operate in contaminated environments, but they were desperate now. 2 months into the invasion and humanity was still fighting. They'd expected to conquer Earth in a week. The first strike hit downtown Houston at dawn. Nerve agents that could kill within seconds. The Velcrin deployed from sealed carriers, waiting for the city to die. Danny's unit had been issued protective gear 3 weeks earlier. They'd sold half of it for alcohol and ammunition. Danny was wearing a gas mask held together with tape and luck. The chemical attack killed 8 of his people immediately. Their masks failed, or they didn't put them on fast enough. Danny watched them seize and foam and die. Then he led the survivors into the Velcrin formation and started killing with a knife. The Velcrin hadn't expected anyone to survive. Their own protective suits were designed for environmental hazards, not close combat. Danny cut through the seals and let the nerve agent in. The Velcrin died from their own weapons. His unit followed his lead. Within an hour, the Velcrin force was dead and Danny's people controlled their sealed carriers. Command tried to evacuate survivors. Danny refused. He had 60 people left and a dozen Velcrin carriers full of chemical weapons. He drove them straight at the nearest Velcrin base. The aliens tried to stop him with aerial bombardment. Danny's carriers had shields designed to survive orbital strikes. He reached the base and released every chemical weapon at once. The Velcrin base held 9,000 troops. It turned into a mass grave. Danny's people wore their improvised protective gear and walked through the aftermath. They executed survivors. Burned bodies. Destroyed equipment. The Velcrin sent reinforcements. Danny was waiting with captured anti-air weapons. He held that base for 6 days. Velcrin Command threw 20,000 troops at him. Danny had started with 60 people. He ended with 14. But the base was littered with Velcrin corpses. Chemical weapons mixed with burning vehicles, mixed with bodies, creating a toxic hell that nothing could survive without protection. The Velcrin finally retook it with orbital bombardment. They leveled the entire area rather than fight Danny's survivors. Command received his final transmission 3 minutes before the strikes hit. Danny was laughing, said it was the most fun he'd had since his last murder conviction, said the Velcrin should send more troops if they wanted a real fight. He survived the bombardment in an underground bunker, climbed out 3 days later and walked 30 miles to friendly lines, lost an arm and both legs below the knee, refused medical discharge and demanded a return to combat. The doctor said he'd never fight again. Danny said he'd learn. Lisa Monroe was operating behind Velcrin lines when the enemy changed tactics again. They stopped trying to conquer Earth, started trying to exterminate it. Orbital bombardment of civilian targets. Cities burning from space, millions dead in hours. The Velcrin had decided that if they couldn't rule humanity, they'd erase it. Earth's governments screamed for negotiations. The Velcrin ignored them. Earth's military tried to protect population centers. The Velcrin had orbital superiority. Nothing could stop the bombardment except destroying the Velcrin fleet. That was impossible. The fleet was too large and too well defended. Lisa made it possible. She took 50 people and every explosive they could carry, stole a Velcrin transport and forged approach credentials, flew straight toward Fleet Command's flagship. The Velcrin were screening every ship now after Jake's attacks. Lisa's credentials didn't pass inspection, so she rammed the flagship instead. The transport was small. The flagship's shields absorbed most of the impact, but Lisa had packed the transport with enough explosives to destroy a city block. The shields held for 3 seconds, then they failed. The explosion tore through 5 decks of the flagship. Lisa and her team were already dead from the impact. But the damage was done. The flagship's reactor destabilized. Velcrin Command tried to evacuate. The reactor went critical before half the crew got off. The flagship exploded like a small sun. Debris and shrapnel tore through 6 nearby ships. The Velcrin fleet lost coordination. Individual captains made independent decisions. Some continued bombardment. Some retreated to defensive positions. Some tried to pursue Earth's remaining forces. Lisa's sacrifice bought Earth 3 days. 3 days without orbital bombardment. 3 days to evacuate cities and move people to underground shelters. 3 days to prepare for the Velcrin's final assault. Command named her a hero posthumously. Her prison record was sealed. She got a statue in Washington. Danny heard about Lisa's death from his hospital bed. He was learning to walk on prosthetic legs, learning to shoot with one arm, learning to hate the Velcrin even more than he already did. The doctor said his recovery would take months. Danny said it would take 2 weeks. He was back in combat in 10 days. The war reached its climax over Earth's orbital space. Every ship, every warrior. They would take Earth or they would die trying. Humanity had nothing left to stop them. The military was exhausted. Weapons were depleted. The prison soldiers had suffered 70% casualties. Command gathered everyone who could still fight. 10,000 people, most of them wounded. All of them were from prisons. Murderers and thieves and psychopaths wearing military uniforms. They were given captured Velcrin ships and one mission: board the enemy fleet and kill everything inside. Jake Palmer led the first wave. Danny Cruz commanded the second. Marcus Webb took the third. They launched from Earth, knowing most of them wouldn't return. The Velcrin fleet numbered 300 capital ships, 10,000 humans in captured transports against an armada that had conquered half the galaxy. The battle lasted 3 days, not because the humans were winning, because they refused to die quickly. Jake's wave hit the Velcrin vanguard and boarded 50 ships simultaneously. The Velcrin expected boarding actions to follow military doctrine. Secure key areas. Disable critical systems. Control the ship. Jake's people just killed everyone they saw. They didn't try to capture ships. They made them uninhabitable, destroyed life support, sabotaged reactors, set fires that couldn't be extinguished. The Velcrin would retake their own ships and find them useless. Drifting coffins full of corpses. Danny's wave targeted Velcrin carriers. Ships full of troops waiting to invade Earth. Danny's people were outnumbered 1,000 to 1 on each ship. They didn't care. They'd attack reactor rooms and trigger overloads. The carriers would explode, taking thousands of Velcrin with them. Danny lost his ships, lost 90% of his people. But 16 carriers turned into expanding debris fields. Marcus Webb went for the command vessels, ships coordinating the fleet. Protected by elite guards and advanced security, Marcus walked through them like they weren't there. His people were down to improvised weapons by the second day. They used pieces of the ship itself. Torn metal, broken equipment. Their own fists and teeth when nothing else worked. The Velcrin had rules about combat, honor codes developed over centuries. The humans ignored all of it. They fought dirty, took hostages, and executed them. Pretended to surrender and detonated explosives, used Velcrin dead as shields and weapons and bait. The aliens called them demons. The humans considered it a compliment. On the third day, the Velcrin broke. Not because they were losing. They were winning. 200 ships still operational. Human forces down to scattered survivors. But the Velcrin warriors wouldn't fight anymore. They'd spent 3 days watching humans who wouldn't stop, who killed while dying, who laughed while burning. The Velcrin fleet commander sent a transmission to Earth. Unconditional surrender. The collective would leave and never return. They admitted defeat. They recognized human sovereignty. They would tell the galaxy that Earth was forbidden territory. Not because humans were strong, because humans were insane. Earth accepted immediately. The war was over. Humanity had won. The cost was catastrophic. 30 million dead, major cities destroyed, economic collapse, environmental damage that would take decades to repair. But Earth was independent. The Velcrin were leaving. The surviving prison soldiers watched the fleet depart from whatever ships they'd managed to capture. Jake Palmer on a Velcrin destroyer with 12 people left from his original 100. Danny Cruz on a cargo hauler with one working leg and infected wounds across his body. Marcus Webb floating in a debris field, waiting for rescue because his ship had lost life support. They'd won. They'd actually won. A species that ruled half the galaxy had retreated from Earth. Command sent recovery ships to collect survivors. Medical teams to treat the wounded. Engineers to salvage captured vessels. Politicians prepared victory speeches and medal ceremonies. Danny refused his medal. Said he didn't fight for honor or recognition. He fought because the alternative was going back to prison. Jake accepted his medal, then sold it for drugs 2 weeks later. Marcus attended the ceremony drunk and threw up on a senator. The prison soldiers had saved humanity. Humanity still didn't know what to do with them. Some were given pardons, clean records, and fresh starts. Most of them were dead within a year. Overdoses or suicides or killed in bar fights. They'd learned to live with violence and couldn't adjust to peace. Some tried to stay in the military. The regular forces didn't want them. Too unstable. Too dangerous. Too much like the people they'd been before the war. A few found purpose. Lisa Monroe got her statue. Jake Palmer became an instructor, teaching special forces how to fight without rules. Danny Cruz worked with engineers studying captured Velcrin technology. Marcus Webb disappeared into the civilian population, and nobody looked too hard for him. Earth started rebuilding. The war had changed everything. Humanity knew it wasn't alone anymore. Knew there were hostile forces beyond the solar system. Knew that sometime in the future, something else might come to conquer them. Earth started preparing. They built new warships using Velcrin technology. Trained new soldiers using tactics learned from the prison units. Established defensive positions throughout the solar system. But everyone knew the truth. The weapons and training hadn't won the war. The prison soldiers won it. The galaxy learned about Earth's victory. Other species sent diplomatic missions wanting to understand how a primitive planet defeated the Velcrin Collective. Humanity told them the truth. We didn't send our best soldiers, we sent our worst people. The galaxy didn't understand. One alien diplomat asked Danny Cruz to explain. How did criminals defeat trained warriors? How did chaos overcome discipline? How did humans win when they should have lost? Danny thought about it while cleaning his prosthetic arm. Thought about the people he'd killed before the war. Thought about the Velcrin he'd killed during it. He told the diplomat something true. Humans are scary when they follow rules, when they train and organize and fight with discipline. But the truly terrifying humans are the ones who don't follow rules, who learned to kill because they wanted to, who enjoyed violence because something was wrong with them. Every species has people like that. Most species lock them away. Earth had unlocked them, given them weapons and targets, and told them to do what they did best. The Velcrin fought for conquest and glory and the expansion of their empire. The prison soldiers fought because they liked killing, and someone finally gave them permission. That's why Earth won. The diplomat asked if Earth would use this strategy again. Danny said absolutely. The prison soldiers had proven something important. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology or numbers or even courage. It was the darkness humans carried inside themselves, the capacity for violence that civilization tried to suppress. Earth had learned to weaponize its own evil. Other species found this horrifying. Humanity found it practical. The galaxy had rules about warfare, honor codes and conventions, and agreed-upon limits. Earth had learned those rules meant nothing against an enemy trying to exterminate you. So Earth kept training soldiers the conventional way. But Earth also kept track of its criminals, its murderers and psychopaths, and people too violent for society. Just in case. The Velcrin never returned. They told the galaxy that Earth was forbidden. They claimed humans were demons wearing skin. They warned other species to avoid humanity at all costs. Some species listened. Others thought the Velcrin were exaggerating. Those species learned the truth the hard way. Danny Cruz was promoted to advisor. His job was helping military command understand unconventional tactics, teaching generals to think like criminals, explaining how people who'd never followed rules in their lives could be effective soldiers. He was good at it. Too good. Some politicians worried about what Danny was creating. Jake Palmer trained special forces units in dirty fighting. His classes had the highest washout rate in the military. Most soldiers couldn't handle what Jake taught. They'd been trained to fight with honor and restraint. Jake taught them to fight like animals. Use every advantage. Break every rule. Hurt the enemy in ways that made other enemies afraid to fight. Marcus Webb consulted for intelligence agencies. His specialty was understanding how desperate people think, how to predict actions that made no logical sense, how to operate behind enemy lines with no support or extraction plan. The agencies paid him well. He spent most of it on alcohol, but when they needed someone to do impossible things in hostile territory, Marcus delivered. Earth's military started recruiting differently. They still took volunteers, still trained conventional forces, but they also watched prisons, monitored convicts with specific violent tendencies, created programs where criminals could serve in special units instead of serving time. Not everyone approved. Most people found it disturbing. But nobody could argue with results. The Second War started 5 years later. A different enemy this time. The Krenth Empire. They'd heard about the Velkrin defeat, thought the Velkrin were weak, thought humanity got lucky. They attacked with twice as many ships and 3 times as many troops. They were wrong about luck. Command deployed the criminal units immediately. Danny led one, Jake led another. Marcus took a third. They'd spent 5 years training others. Now they were back in combat. The Krenth expected military resistance. They got something worse. The Krenth learned the same lesson the Velkrin had. Humanity didn't send its best. It sent its worst. The ones who scared other humans, the ones civilization locked away. And when you fought Earth, you didn't fight its soldiers. You fought its monsters. The Second War lasted 3 months. The Krenth suffered 70% casualties. They withdrew to their empire and never attacked again. Other species took notice. Earth wasn't just defended. Earth was dangerous. The galaxy started treating humanity differently, with respect and fear. Because everyone knew the truth. Humans were scary enough when they followed rules. But the humans who didn't follow rules were nightmares. And Earth kept them on a leash, ready to release them whenever necessary. The galaxy had thousands of species, millions of worlds, billions of soldiers, but nobody wanted to fight Earth. Because Earth would send the murderers in army attire, and those murderers would show you why humanity locked them away from itself. They'd show you why rules existed, by breaking every single one, and enjoying it the entire time.